All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're tackling a huge, and I mean huge, challenge that so many companies face. That massive gap between what they spend on developing their people and the actual results they get for the business. It almost always starts with something like this, a really frustrated voice from the top. I've heard this exact line or something very close to it from so many CEOs. It's this feeling that no matter how clear you think the strategy is, it just gets lost in translation. It never quite makes it to the front lines. So, does that sound familiar? I bet it does for a lot of you. It's the sign of a really deep disconnect inside a company. And you have to wonder, why does this keep happening, year after year, despite all the money we pour into training? Well, let's unpack that. First off, we've got to realize this isn't just your problem or your CEO's problem. It's pretty much a universal frustration. It's a disconnect that really does start at the top, but you feel the ripple effects through the entire organization. And, the easy person to blame is often the learning and development department, right? The C-suite says our L&D programs aren't good enough, or our people just aren't growing fast enough. But here's the thing. Blaming a single department completely misses the point. The problem isn't just a bad training program, it's a fundamental, systemic issue with how we think about strategy versus how people actually grow. And that brings us right to the core idea of this whole explainer. There is a paradox, a fundamental paradox, that sits right at the heart of why so many organizations struggle with this. Okay, so here it is. This is the fundamental flaw. We treat capability development, which is this personal, ongoing, continuous journey, like it's just another project. You know the drill. We make a calendar, we design some workshops, we ask people to sign up, and check the box. But real, lasting skill, true capability, it just doesn't happen that way. It never has. Now, check this out, because this visual really explains the whole problem in one go. On the left, you've got strategy. It's always top-down. It starts with a big organizational goal that gets broken down into what each function needs to do, and finally, it lands on the individual's plate. But capability, how people actually get better, it works in the exact opposite direction. It starts with one person, an individual, learning a new skill or having an insight. That skill then helps their function, their team. And if enough individuals do that, eventually it can change the entire organization. You see, they're two processes moving in completely opposite directions, and we wonder why they don't meet in the middle. So if that corporate top-down model for growth is broken, how do people actually build their skills? How do they really grow? Let's talk about the human side of this for a second. Just think about anyone you know who's really, truly great at what they do. I guarantee their growth came from a mix of these three things, right? They had mentors, people who were masters of the craft and showed them the ropes. They got tons of exposure. They worked on different projects in different cities, maybe even different countries. And that experience shaped their thinking. And third, they were relentless self-educators, always reading, always watching, always learning from what's happening around them. The key here is that this is a continuous, organic process. It's not a series of scheduled events on a calendar. Okay, so we get the paradox and we get how people really learn. How in the world do we fix this? Well, a really powerful first step is to just change the way we talk about it. Let's ditch the corporate jargon and start focusing on actual results. And this table just nails the shift we need to make. Seriously, stop calling it a functional skills program. Call it what you actually want it to be, a program for doing the job well. Don't run some generic behavioral program. Run culture-building workshops, where the only thing that matters is whether the culture actually gets better. Managerial development, that's meaningless. What you really need is a program for delivering predictable results. And a leadership program shouldn't just be a nice title. It should be laser-focused on driving growth and change. You see how that simple change in language forces you to think about the outcome, not just the activity? It's a game changer. This quote is the perfect example of what not to do. And we've all been there, right? The company offsite for team building, everybody goes rock climbing or does a trust fall, you come back to the office feeling great, and by Monday morning, absolutely nothing has changed. It's a fun day out, sure, but it's completely disconnected from the real work and the real results the business needs. So this focus on results brings us to the next super critical point, measurement. How do we actually know if any of this is working? What does success look like? Well, the metric that most companies use is number of training days. And let me be perfectly clear, this is the most useless metric you could possibly track. It's worse than useless. All it measures is activity, not impact. It tells you nothing about whether your people are actually more capable or whether the business is performing any better. It's a vanity metric. So let's just throw that old scorecard in the trash. Here's a new one that's tied directly to the financial health of the business. Ask yourselves these questions. Is the rate of our cost increase lower than the rate of our revenue increase? Is our ratio of working capital to cost going down? Is the rate of our net worth increase going up? Is our profit before tax increasing? If you can say yes to these, then congratulations. Your people are getting more capable. It's showing up directly on the bottom line. And you see, when you start measuring what truly matters, it forces this huge shift in your thinking. You suddenly realize that building capability isn't just some HR task. It's a core strategic imperative, and it needs a totally new model of ownership. Because the single biggest thing that kills strategic capability is what's called the departmental view. It's when every department looks at the company's strategy through its own little silo. The strategy team wants to launch new products, but the sales team says, sorry, we're stretched thin. And the product team says, we've got a backlog. The big organizational goal just gets killed by 1,000 tiny cuts because everyone is protecting their own turf. And that is precisely why the ownership model has to change. Building capability is an organizational strategy. Sure, it might be executed by HR, but it absolutely must be driven and owned by the CEO's office or the core strategy team. It's about nothing less than ensuring the long-term survival and growth of the entire company. And here's the really encouraging part. When you get this right, when you align the model, the language, the metrics, and the ownership, you can see a fundamental, culture-shifting change in as little as 2 years. This is not some 10-year project. It's about being consistent and focused on the right things. So, if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. Building your organization's capability isn't some extra task you have to squeeze in when you have time. It's not a nice to have. It is one of the most fundamental jobs of leadership. It's absolutely essential for survival, let alone growth. Which leaves us with one last question to think about for your own company. When you really think about building the skills, the culture, and the leadership you're going to need for tomorrow, who is truly in charge of its future?